Alright, I'm going to be recording another video. This time it isn't really prompted by doom scrolling. Uh, it's more so just something that I've seen, or something that I've been questioning a lot of. Um, and it kind of ties into the last few videos that I uploaded, or like ramblings. Um, and really it's the concept of like internal versus external self, um, particularly in the application of like gender and gender identity. So to preempt this, uh, or I guess for context, since the last video that I posted, I don't know if microphones are listening or what, but I've been getting a bunch of fucking videos in my algorithm about being non-binary and shit like that. And to be very clear, I'm not. I, I think, oh man, I'm gonna say a lot of controversial shit and probably upset everyone. I think that non-binary stuff is bullshit, for reasons that I will get into. Or when I say non-binary is bullshit, I mean in the sense of like as a gender identity, I think it's bullshit. Uh, Before I get too far into it, I should probably uh, define things more clearly, just so that it's easier to see where I'm coming from. So, like, this is how I would define gender, and as far as I understand, I think this is the way most people define it. But gender being like the social norms and or presentation of a person, or originating in their sex. So like gender comes from the traditional roles of men and women, as in like male female sex, throughout society, and its accepted social presentation. And so in that regard, gender has to be intrinsically tied with biological sex. So, broadly, I don't think that non binary is a valid gender identity because of the fact that ultimately gender only exists in the context of the roles of sexes. And I think that non binary is broadly the concept of not wanting to be pigeonholed in either of those roles. Like, not non-binary is the idea of not wanting to play that game, or at least that's how I perceive it. And so to define non-binary as like a third gender doesn't make sense. It's like it exists outside of that, right? So all the other like bullshit quote unquote non-binary genders, they're not, you can't call them genders, in, again, personally, because of the fact that I think that gender intrinsically is tied with your sex and the role that historically it would have fulfilled. That isn't to say that someone can't be non-binary. I just don't think it's a gender identity. So that so that's why I don't think that there are more than two genders. However, I do think that it's possible for someone to be trans, because obviously, if you're trans, you are transitioning from one gender to the other, and you are trying to be perceived socially as like the other gender, right? So you are fulfilling the social norms, social contract of said gender. So the root, so summarizing, the root of gender, like the origin, is based on sex, and that's where it comes from. And I don't think, frankly, there's a lot of utility in it nowadays. There was before, because obviously reproduction and survival was like the only thing that mattered, but we have gone past that more or less, I guess. or at least I'm not driven by reproduction, not that I know of, and I don't think most people are either. Most people would, I say most people, but fuck, I don't actually know that. I would hope people are driven more by like self fulfillment, and some sort of like greater philosophical goal or spiritual goal or some shit like that. But anyway, so I don't know if it comes off, but obviously everything that I've discussed has been like external. So it's all about presentation and how you appear to others, how you behave around others, and how they perceive you. So all of this is like your external identity, right? Because frankly, your internal identity doesn't really matter. Like you can tell someone, oh hey, internally identify as blah blah blah. No one's gonna give a shit. No one cares. They're still gonna see you the way you present externally, which is the unfortunate reality. Contents of your character do not matter. But yeah, so that's kind of the crux of the issue for me, where it's like I don't want to be perceived externally as like a gender. Like, how do I explain this? I generally don't have any issues with like the pronoun stuff, like he, him, whatever the fuck. I don't care about any of that. The thing that bothers me is interacting with people and knowing that before I've said or done anything, they've already made a bunch of assumptions on my behavior, my mental state, my personality, based off of the fact that I'm a guy. I really don't like that, because I feel like just being aware of that makes me like anxious and annoyed, because now I know I have to perform a character or face social like rejection. It's very bothersome. And I guess that more broadly ties into the general theme of like your internal versus your external identity, where it doesn't, or like everyone wants, essentially you want to be perceived as your internal identity. So you want your internal identity and your external identity to match. However, you don't really have a lot of control over your external identity. Like obviously there are things you can do, but you're at the mercy of society to some extent, like societal memes and like norms and motifs and things like that, like the common like vernacular. So at the end of the day, because people don't view each other as individuals, we view each other like in the pre-existing structure that maybe someday will change, but frankly I have no hope in humanity. Ultimately, if you don't want to end up socially isolated, your only option is to play a caricature based on how other people would perceive you to match their expectation. Which, I mean, if your internal identity already matches, then that's fine. But if it doesn't, you're stuck. You can't be true to yourself, as it were, because otherwise you'll be alone.